too much this morning. So our guest speaker today, I'm really delighted that Andrew has been able to make it today to speak to you. Andrew is the director of the Inova School here in Santa Rosa, and I believe there is one in the East Bay now, Concord. And it's called the ACE, the Inova Center for Education, is that it? And its specialty is to educate people, young people on the spectrum that are challenged by autism in one sort or another. This is a spectrum disorder. There are people that are highly functioning. There are people that cannot speak. And just a very brief history, and Andrew will get into this more. 50 years ago, the professional community really did not know what to do with these people, and there were many, many lives lost, and much human potential lost with these kids that some could not talk, some had other behavioral, cognitive, or learning challenges, and oftentimes they were placed in institutions. I mean, it was really heart-rending, the history of autism and our dawning awareness of the neurological, organic origins of these behaviors and these challenges. And Andrew saw the need here in Sonoma County very early on. One of the first people to see the need here, and in the early 2000s, that is the need for special accommodations and special education and a special outreach to these kids to develop their potential. They were falling by the waysides in schools. Schools didn't really know how to handle them. And Andrew had the inspiration and the insight to see the importance of developing a program that would allow these kids to meet their potential. And so he started in 2000 the Inova School. In the Inova School, you have 200 students now, Andrew? And the Inova School has touched hundreds of families and thousands of people's lives, tens of thousands of people's lives here in this county and elsewhere. It's become a national model for helping these people to achieve, Marty, and you guys at that back table, to achieve their potential, their human potential. And Andrew is a leader in the field. Inova is a shining example here in the community. And without further ado, would you please extend a warm welcome, Rotary welcome to Andrew Bailey.
How do you do? Our speaker, how do you do? Is there anything that we can do for you? Thanks for coming here today. We're with you all the way. How do you do? Our speaker, how do you do?
All right. Wow. I've been to a number of Rotary meetings and I've never been sung up to the podium before. That's pretty cool. Thank you guys. And thanks for having me this morning. I'm back in my old stomping ground. As Bill pointed out, I lived in Sebastopol for 20 years, right around the corner here. Both of my kids were Hanley alums, proud Hanley alums. It's always good to be back here in West County, where people do it right, because you guys have big hearts and big heads with horns growing out of them. So we're going to go ahead and not really very well understood. So
your computer is well.
Turn the computer on.
A lot of things.
Autism is...
These are unscripted interviews with parents of kids that went to our school. Your state senator Mike McGuire made this video for me in 2004 when he was at TV 50.
Autism is a mutation in the brain chemistry.
These are real students from my school. This kid's a genius. People think he's a girl who gets teased all the time.
Autism is a unique...
This young man's a Napa Valley EMT now, works for the Sheriff's Department, saves lives.
1 out of 166.
He couldn't read when we met him.
Autism really is just
needs a set of challenges and strengths. It's got its ups and it's got its downs.
In a way, it's helpful with your brain power. You're kind of more smart, right? I kind of learned how to flip. I'm a quick learner. Well, you take that.
ANOVA Education and Behavior Consultation is a non-profit charitable corporation providing consultation and private school services throughout Northern California. The ANOVA Center for Education, known as the School,
Hello?
part of this unique organization. The ANOVA Soundbar Education
Turn the soundbar on.
providing social solutions and positive behaviors.
This is not her.
I'm Jeremy Ron, living in Alaska.
Rebecca McAfee Lawson, and I have autism.
The ANOVA Center for Education serves children diagnosed with high-functioning autism, Asperger's, and other neurodevelopmental impairments. In an already underserved population, these children are least likely to be identified, understood, and treated with quality and respect. Together, we provide help and the hope children and families that have such short supply.
My name is Ryan Clark Sorensen, and I have autism.
I am Glenn Snooper. Hello. I happen to be on the autistic spectrum.
Children with autism and Asperger's syndrome are bright, many with above average IQs, but they often don't understand humor or socially fit in with other kids. Because of this, they may face emotional or behavioral challenges in the classroom or on the playground. Sometimes these challenges become so severe that children cannot even be safely served in their own neighborhood schools. Until the ACE school, families and public school districts had nowhere to turn for help. With our unique educational mission, ANOVA is changing that. ANOVA means change.
The ACE School is founded on the belief that every student has the ability to learn, including students with neurodevelopmental impairments like autism and nonverbal learning disability. And while many of the public school systems here in Sonoma County have made a valiant effort to create programs and services to treat these kids, they're not always successful. And so a certain percentage of students need a therapeutic environment, and that is what we offer. We are a therapeutic milieu, basically meaning from the time the student steps in the door in the morning at 8:30 until they leave at 2:30 in the afternoon, they are receiving therapy of some sort, either social cognition therapy, occupational therapy, academic therapy, or positive behavior intervention.
I can't find the.
ANOVA is special, I feel, because it affects so many lives outside of just these students that we service here. Their families, their siblings. It kind of is the ripple effect, really. And we've been able to do some good stuff with these kids on a social level to where their parents have been able to see huge increases in the social activities that they're able to participate in.
This one was trying to go in a circle around.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
The students here at ANOVA, they're really fortunate, and what makes our program so successful for them, I believe, is the fact that it's all-encompassing. So at our school, we totally understand that social cognition deficits don't just impact relationships. You can't separate academics from social, from interacting with people. It's all one thing. So at our school, we have an occupational therapist here. who sees the kids individually and consults with the teacher to give them strategies, the sensory strategies they need for sensory diets in the classroom, for example. Encouraging the teachers, let them chew gum, let them suck on candy, let them bounce on a ball, give them fidgets. All these things are going to help with their attention, and when you have their attention, that's when learning happens. The speech language therapist, myself, I'm part of this program here full-time, seeing kids individually, seeing kids in groups, seeing kids in the classroom doing a whole class lesson. Therefore, the staff, the teachers all see what I do. We have meetings on a regular basis so that we can have a cohesive program. We're always consulting, sharing strategies with each other, bouncing ideas off, sharing what's worked, what we're working on to continue with all of that. So it's this really lovely program that so few places can offer.
Think about what's not happening. So it's going to be games.
Right. I mean, you come and look and sit in any of these classrooms and see what is going on, see how amazing it is, and see the changes in these kids, and see how other parents, and talk to other parents about, what kind of changes they see in their kids, because you don't get this in a typical environment, and you get the constant interaction between specialists and staff, and it doesn't exist anywhere else.
By providing the appropriate amount of attention to the individual. This is what I think is the best part of the school, as they recognize what each individual needs and they match it and they provide it. And that's where the success, I feel, lies.
Oh, that's it. Okay. So that's not half of it, but I'll talk for the rest of it. Let's see. I'm not sure where to start because there was about 8 minutes left of that video. So it's, the point about all of this is these kids are obligated to receive an education. We serve students from every school district in Sonoma County. When a kid wants to go to their local high school, tries to go to their local high school, shows up at their local high school, and the experience that all those other 1,500 kids find to be extremely stimulating and amazing in a college platform like the school that my kids went to right over here, not every kid can do that. I call it the bells and smells. Our world is not always fair. And if you've ever been in a high school, and I know some of you here have actually been principals in some of these high schools, it's not always fair. And what happened at Amalie just last week with the graffiti and all of that stuff, that can be really upsetting for a kid with Asperger's. That kind of thing right there can lead a kid with Asperger's to say, I'm never going back there. The school district can't say, well, we're done with him then. He's not going to the public school. We don't have to serve him. No, they can't do that. They have to find a place to serve this student. And until ANOVA existed in 2003, the only programs for kids with autism were programs for really low functioning kids. Kids that flap their hands and walk on their tiptoes and maybe wear diapers until they're 20 and never learn to talk and will never necessarily be independent, productive members of society. When I say necessarily, because there's a lot of controversy and we do a lot of work with kids who are like that as well. But you can tell by looking at the kids in this video, they're all 130, 140, 150 IQ kids. They're the nerdy, sensitive kids that will tell you how tall cumulus clouds are, even though you don't want to know how tall cumulus clouds are. I mean, you might care, but if you're a 16-year-old standing on a quad and it's Friday and it's game day and football and some kid walks up to you and says, did you know cumulus clouds can be 50,000 feet tall? You're not turned on by that if you're a 16-year-old kid. You don't want to talk to that kid. You don't want to interact with that kid. That right there is enough to get that kid to go home and say, no one likes me, my life sucks, I want to kill myself, you can't make me go back there. It doesn't matter whether the school is great. The school's great. It has 1,500 kids, and every 60 minutes a bell rings really loud, and kids jump up and they run out in the hall and they bump into each other, and some of them are breaking the rules, and some of them are sneaking off to go down below the bleachers to smoke pot, and others are all of the things that kids, that teenagers do that we help guide them through. Our kids experience the same thing, and unlike lower functioning kids who don't understand, you heard all these kids know that they're on the spectrum, every one of them. I'm autistic? What? That's bad. I'm never gonna get over that. That's incurable, right? So we gotta talk to our kids about that and say, you know what, it's actually a type of diversity. There's a book out right now called Neurotribes, which talks about neurological diversity. And it says that some of these people may not be disabled, they just might be diverse. And you guys know who Temple Grandin is? You ever heard of Temple Grandin? Yeah. Like 1 year ago, this past weekend, I had the good fortune of spending the weekend with Temple. She spoke at our school last year, and I got a chance to meet and have dinner with her. And I've known Temple for a while, and she said something that it was really fascinating to me, because I asked her about not going to a public high school, even though she's brilliant and has a PhD and travels around the world. She said, they kept trying to get me to socialize with high schoolers. Now that's a skill I just don't need. Think about it. Who socializes like high schoolers? Nobody does. No one's gonna put white out on your water bottle so when you take a drink you have white lips. That doesn't happen. No one's done this here since I've seen that. No one's teased or bullied, no one's stole anybody's backpack. Although there has been a little bit of elbowing, you know, the good-natured stuff that adults do with each other. Our kids don't get sarcasm. They don't get dry humor. They don't get when you say something that you don't really hate this guy. You actually really like him, and you're nudging him and ribbing him and teasing him because you think that's funny and a way to bond with that person. High school kids do that to the extreme. And most of our kids are high schoolers, by the way. I mean, the public schools in Sonoma County are great. You guys all know that already. That's not an issue. And that's why we exist here in Sonoma County, is because the public schools are so great. In other areas where public school educators don't care as much and they don't have as big a continuum, they wouldn't provide a service like this. So I started ANOVA in the garage in 2000 in Santa Rosa with just an idea. And in 2003, I had a couple of kids on my caseload who weren't going to school. And so we started the ANOVA school with one classroom in Petaluma in 2003, and now we have 130 kids at our program at the Luther Burbank Center, which, as some of you may know, burned down in the October fire. So our program is now in portables in the parking lot back there. If you ever happen to go to a show, you'll see all those portables back at the LBC. So we've actually been dealing with quite the adrenaline rush. And any of you guys lose your houses in the fire, or any business or anything like that? Probably, I'm sure you know people who have. Well, now you do, because I'm here. It's not fun to lose $1 million worth of textbooks, computers, chairs, desks. I mean, for those of you who work in public schools, imagine losing everything. Imagine your teachers who lost their credentials, their lesson plans, 30 years worth of stuff, that ceramic apple that your favorite student gave you, teacher's mother gave you 20 years ago, your favorite house plant that's on your desk, all that stuff's gone. And so our kids are really dealing with some hard stuff right now, but the community has been amazing. You guys have been extremely supportive, and that's really necessary, because the kids in this is a 10-year-old video, and as I look at this, I see a number of our kids who would have been in institutions. In fact, a number of them were coming from institutions. One of them is a Napa Valley EMT and is saving lives. Another little boy in the yellow t-shirt's in the National Guard now. He showed up back in his dress uniform about 2 weeks ago. A couple of these students are married to each other and have kids. But all of them, I just got a call from one of our students. He was in Florida. He graduated from the Harley-Davidson Mechanics School and was living in the Everglades repairing Harleys and lost 100 pounds. So all of our kids are really capable of being independent, productive citizens, of being what Temple calls neurodiverse instead of neurodisabled. And that's really comes down to social, emotional, and behavioral stuff. That's why kids go to our school. It doesn't have much to do with academics. Great teachers at every public school in this county. Our kids are smart. They're often the smartest kid in the class. They just don't know how to put it together into a student-like experience. And you can imagine how hard that is, and you think about it, most of you probably remember middle school and high school and how daunting that is socially and emotionally for kids. And it's extremely difficult for the students who go to our school. And so we try to keep families together. That's the ripple effect on our logo up there. You don't see that, but we help kids. And for a kid to have a happy childhood is basically a human right, I believe. And these kids are miserable. If you're trying to kill yourself and you're in a hospital, that kind of qualifies as being not very happy, and by definition. So a number of these students have been hospitalized, a number of them have tried to hurt themselves or others. And if you're a parent and you have to call the police to your home to come and take your child, imagine how heartbreaking that can be. And it happens a lot with these families. And the kid doesn't come to school in the morning on Monday, and then the special ed director gets a call and says, my kid's at First Hospital in Vallejo, what are we gonna do? He won't go back to school. Until ANOVA existed, there was nothing for these kids. And, but we also don't have enough kids in this county to put together one program like this for any district. Even Santa Rosa City Schools, which is the largest district in the county, doesn't have enough kids with Asperger's in any given year to put together a program like this. So everyone puts together these consortiums and buses their kids all over the place. We have kids at the Luther Burbank Center now who live in San Francisco, Mill Valley, San Rafael, all over Marin, San Francisco. We had a kid from Mendocino who Mendocino School District bused him down to Santa Rosa for 3 years. Beautiful drive, 100 miles one way from Mendocino, and the public school district funded that. We had a girl from Willits, that's 80 miles one way. Our school in Concord was not something I ever intended to do. Concord was busing, we had kids being bused from Sacramento to Santa Rosa. And the district was funding this because they had no choice. The kids obligated to get an education. There are no other schools that provide high academic standards. And we teach calculus and geometry and world history and government, and our kids are going to school. My very first graduate, the kid whose dad led off this video, just graduated from UC Davis with 2 degrees, and he's in their PhD program. Asperger called his kids his little professors, and that's what a lot of our kids are. And they don't like the fact that you don't want to know how tall cumulus clouds are, because that's super fascinating to them, and dinosaurs and insects and all the things that our kids can turn into adults who can use that narrow interest to be a professor or a plumber or a biologist or whatever they want to be. I mean, narrow range of interest is really good for an adult when you have a job. But if you're a teenager, a narrow range of interest means I don't want to play what you want to play today. Or I'm not going to go to your house and jump on the trampoline because I want you to come to my house and play video games. And that level of inflexibility can be devastating to relationships. And when kids don't have relationships, they're really unhappy, and then they try to hurt themselves. And when that happens, parents can't go to work. And when parents can't go to work, companies can't run, and communities can't function. So when you hear people say it all starts with the kids, that sounds like a cliche. Any of you who've stayed home in the last couple of weeks with a sick kid or haven't been able to go to work or haven't been able to live your life because your children, you don't just leave your children behind if they have the flu or if they have Asperger's. You do something about it. And if they have Asperger's, that doesn't go away like the flu does after a few weeks. So it's a journey. And you're on this journey alone until you find people. And that's why I love Rotary. I mean, I would get up at 4 in the morning and come and talk to Rotary clubs, because these 4 truths are pretty much how I live my life and how I look at the kids I work with. So thanks for having me today. And if you have any questions, I'm here all morning. I can answer them. Yeah, Marty.
Andrew, first of all, thank you for the good work you do. And you know, my goal is always to try and get the kid back for a period or 2 in the regular school. And I appreciate you working with us to do that. Have you watched the TV show about the doctor?
The Good Doctor?
Yeah, The Good Doctor. What's your opinion? And is this helpful or not helpful to learn about autism for people that just watch it?
Well, that's a really good question, and you guys know Marty. He was the principal at Hanley when my kid went there, and Marty and I worked on a couple of pretty high-profile autism cases. Sometime afterwards, I'll tell you whatever happened to that kid, by the way. The one that sued West Sonoma County High School District and lost. Thank you. The kid didn't deserve, and that's a different situation. But The Good Doctor is an interesting show because it portrays a person who is on the autism spectrum. And it is a spectrum for a reason. One thing I will tell you is no one knows what causes autism, no one knows how to cure it, and no one knows whether it's even one thing or not. In fact, that's why they call it a spectrum. If you go to the UC Davis Mind Institute, which is one of the world's leading autism research study, right here at UC Davis, we have one of the world's leading autism, and the director, the science director of the Mind Institute at UC Davis uses the term autisms because he believes it's not one thing that we're talking about. So you would look at someone like the good doctor and say, that's just someone who has a social cognition or a social thinking deficit and doesn't really understand how to interact with other people and how they think. But they may not have a huge sensory problem. And that sensory problem is often really what disrupts things. Those of you who saw the Temple Grandin movie, it's that squeeze machine that she invented to keep her body regulated. Imagine being itchy, hot, upset, like you're most anxious when you just want to scream because you're trying to do a million things at once. Something just fell on the ground and broke. Someone called you. That sort of frantic situation. Our kids feel like that all the time. The good doctor doesn't seem like he's that impacted by some of those things. So he's obviously able to go to medical school. He's able to stay in a big environment with lots of things going on. And it seems like the problems he's having are more social and social thinking. And that's actually really what our people have the most problems with. So in that way, it is really pretty accurate to see. We're going to see more and more people like that out there. I mean, when Temple talked last week, she said Silicon Valley's full of these people, and our tech society, the way we're moving, where human interaction is not that important anymore. I can just pick up my screen and talk to people. You know? I'm not sure even whose phone that is, so I can figure out how to use it.
That's fine, unfortunately. Very nice to find it yet.
There you go. But there are a lot of different portrayals of autism in the media, and I actually think they're all helpful because 20 years ago, no one had ever really heard of autism. I graduated from a major university in the East in 1985 with a degree of psychology and never heard of autism. So it really is a thing that's just come up in the last 20 years in terms of how many people there are. And I like the media and what they do with that. So you had a question before he steals the mic from me?
Do you have time, Bill? Yeah, sure. Okay, most of the portrayals of Asperger's that we see in the media are pretty extreme. How would Asperger's, considering that it's a spectrum, and you talk about someone maybe at the lower end of the spectrum, manifest in an adult?
Well, Asperger's isn't even a thing anymore. It's been eliminated from the nomenclature, so now it's just called autism spectrum disorder, ASD. And you have people who are never going to talk, who are never going to be able to hold a conversation or never even think, all the way to people like the good doctor who would be at the higher end of the spectrum and considered Asperger's. It really, it's hard to answer that question because the portrayals in the media are portraying people who are functional and who are independent. What I like to say is, you guys have all seen The Big Bang Theory, right? Sheldon, Sheldon, the guy, he is clearly a great example of someone who has Asperger's. The one thing about Sheldon is he would not have friends in real life. In real life, he's annoying as hell. Who would want to hang out with that guy? You can't sit in my chair. It's Tuesday. We're going to do this. You have to follow my rules. No one except 3 other Asperger's geniuses who happen to have degrees. And it's a TV show, so they have to make the guy have friends. But in real life, Sheldon is exactly like our kids. He's an annoying know-it-all. He's an intellectual vigilante, which is great for if you, but kids don't like that. So what we see in the media are the functional, independent people who have a few problems that some sympathetic others can come and take care of. If anyone ever watched the show Parenthood, which was on TV a few years ago, there was an autistic character in that show, Max. That was the most accurate portrayal. So, thank you guys, thanks very much, I appreciate it.
We do have one more to ask.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me so far. All right.
And so we have our guest speaker draw the winning ticket. As of last week, we had $75 in the pot, and we added some more this week, so we're we're ready to go here.
We have tickets down there?
We have tickets down there, and then the person that draws the winning ticket gets to pick a card.
All right. So I supposed to draw a ticket?
Yep.
Reach down in there, make sure everything looks 429 represented.
And the number is 8419. Oh, the rich get rich, yeah, it's Marty. And Marty's always the one who, as soon as the ticket is drawn, he always says, the rich get richer.
You know, this literal stuff, about 5 years ago, I did this exact same thing, and one of the girls who has autism, they said, everybody bring your card up really fast, we're gonna do the drawing. So I walk up to this girl who I knew who has autism, and I said, make sure I win. As I gave her my card. I was joking when I said, make sure I win. Literally, a minute later, they call my name, Andrew Bailey. I walk up, and right in front of everybody, 100 people, she goes, you wanna know how I did it? So she went ahead and explained to me how she held my card in her hand like a magician, and then as she reached down in, she just pulled it out. Well, everyone is watching. And I'm like, I was joking, Julia.
So he's looking for the ace of spades, and unlike this guy. Oh, ace of hearts.
Ace of hearts? You know what? The ace of hearts is our symbol. Because we're the ACE school, the Nova Center for Education. We have our Ace of Hearts ball every year. So the Ace of Hearts is actually, that is our card. So the fact that you just learned the Ace of Hearts is pretty important.
So, joke of the day.
Pam emailed it to me.
Uh-oh, I didn't get that changed.
No, she just
Yes.
emailed it to me. And good ridding for Rob McCauley. You can take it, right? Can't hear you. Okay.
Oh, here you, Linda.
A young couple invited their aged pastor for Sunday dinner. While they were in the kitchen preparing the meal, the minister asked their son what they were having. Goat, the little boy replied. Goat, replied the startled man of the cloth. Are you sure about that? Yep, said the youngster. I heard Pa say to Mom, might as well have the old goat for dinner today as any other day.
Thank you. Joe.
Happy trails